Good morning, everybody. I hope you had a wonderful rest of your Tuesday yesterday and having a wonderful Wednesday so far, and it only gets better.
Today we're going to go over Tuesday's bell ringer and continue with the tiny seed. Today we will finish the story, but we're not done working with the story.
We're going to go over Tuesday and both of the Tuesday bell ringers. Our first question we're going to look at is question number 3. It says, which word has 3 syllables? So our key words are which, 3, which is very important, and syllable. So what is a syllable? A syllable is the way we break up a word with our vowel and consonant sounds. So very often we were taught in younger years, we could clap out the syllables, tap them on the table, and guess what? Miss Ellis still counts them out sometimes on her fingers today. So let's look at our first word. Our first word is happy. Let's say the word. We go happy. So how many syllables does that one have? 2. All right, let's look at the next one. Participate. How many lines did we draw on that one? We drew 4. Let's look at the next one. Charming. Again, only 2 vowel syllable sounds. And last one, marigold. That one has 3. Our question asked us for how many? 3. So is our answer going to be A? No. Is our answer going to be B? No. What about C? Still no. Our answer is D, marigold. All right, let's look at number 4. This one says, highlight all the verbs. There may be more than one. All right, so we're going to highlight. So if you have a highlighter, feel free to use it. If not, just use your pencil or whatever you have available. And it says, highlight all of the verbs. Well, what is a verb? A verb is an action word. That's something that most of the time we can act out, an action word. So for example, jump. We can act that out. We can jump up and down. Smile. We can make our face smile. So let's look at number 1. It says Barrett builds a sandcastle. Well, we know Barrett is going to be our noun because that's the person. And what is he doing? He's building a sandcastle. So build is going to be our verb. So your verb is also what, another way to think of verb is, it is what the who is doing. So it's our what. What's going on? So next one says, Alondra plays games. So what is Alondra doing? She plays games. Okay. Next one says, Isaiah hits the ball and runs the bases. What is Isaiah doing? He is hitting and running. All right, that was your Tuesday bell ringer.
Yesterday, you watched the first part of the tiny seed and learned about the seed. And that little seed was sure trying hard to be like those others, no matter how small he was. Well, guess what? Today, that tiny seed is going to do something amazing. So stand by, listen, get ready, and listen to the rest of The Tiny Seed by Eric.
Now it is spring. After a few months, the snow has melted. It is really spring. Birds fly by, the sun shines, rain falls. The seeds grow so round and full that they start to burst open a little. Now they are not seeds anymore, they are plants. First they send roots down into the earth. Then their little stems and leaves begin to grow up toward the sun and air. There is another plant that grows much faster than the new little plants. It is a big fat weed, and it takes all the sunlight and the rain away from one of the small new plants, and that little plant dies. The tiny seed hasn't begun to grow yet. It will be too late, hurry! But finally, it too starts to grow into a plant. The warm weather also brings the children out to play. They too have been waiting for the sun and springtime. One child doesn't see the plants as he runs along and, oh, he breaks one. Now it cannot grow anymore. The tiny plant that grew from the tiny seed is growing fast, but its neighbor grows even faster. Before the tiny plant has 3 leaves, the other plant has 7. And look, a bud, and now even a flower. But what is happening? First there are footsteps, then a shadow looms over them. Then a hand reaches down and breaks off the flower. A boy has picked the flower to give to a friend. It is summer. Now the tiny plant from the tiny seed is all alone. It grows on and on. It doesn't stop. The sun shines on it and the rain waters it. It has many leaves. It grows taller and taller. It is taller than the people. It is taller than the trees. It is taller than the houses. And now a flower grows on it. People come from far and near to look at this flower. It is the tallest flower they have ever seen. It is a giant flower. All summer long, the birds and bees and butterflies come visiting. They have never seen such a big and beautiful flower. Now it is autumn again. The days grow shorter, the nights grow cooler, and the wind carries yellow and red leaves past the flower. Some petals drop from the giant flower and they sail along with the bright leaves, over the land and down to the ground. The wind blows harder. The flower has lost almost all of its petals. It sways and bends away from the wind, but the wind grows stronger and shakes the flower. Once more the wind shakes the flower, and this time the flower's seed pod opens. Out come many tiny seeds that quickly sail far away on the wind.
Wow, wasn't that story amazing? That tiny seed ended up being so much greater and so much more amazing than those big seeds that he was so envious of at the beginning of the story. So just like that tiny seed, one day you may not think you're as great as everybody else, but guess what? Everybody is great in their own way and may just not be the same as everybody else, but that's okay. So let's get started on our questions for today. Just like yesterday, Miss Ellis is going to do the first half of the questions with you, and then you'll do the second half independently, and that will be for a grade. So let's get started.
Seed, second part, and it should have had Tuesday at the top in the corner. We're going to go ahead and start just like we did yesterday and start with our keywords. What were some words that we heard several times in the story that were repeated more than once? One word that Miss Ellis picked out was the word tiny. We still heard them talk so often about that seed just being tiny, not as big as the others. We also heard the word plant, because once that tiny seed was in the ground, it slowly turned into a plant. And we also heard the word grows, because the tiny seed slowly grew into something amazing. Let's look at our first question. It says, what happens to the seed? So this is a what question. So we're wanting to know what happens to the seeds. And this one is not being specifically to our tiny seed. This is just seeds in general. So at the end of yesterday, we learned that it had turned into winter and the plants had landed on the ground. So the seeds landed on the ground. Now remember, we got to write in complete sentences. That means a capital at the beginning and a period or some other form of punctuation at the end. Now, of course, remember, Miss Ellis is not a great drawer, but I'm going to do my best. So here's our ground. Put a little bit of grass everywhere. And all of our little seeds have landed on the ground. And our little bitty seed is right there all by himself. All right, perfect. What are they now? Now, what is our they? What are we talking about when we say they? We're talking about our seeds. So we want to know what our seeds are now. And now that it's springtime, the seeds have turned into plants. So they are now plants. So again, Miss Ellis is not a drawer, but we're going to draw our ground again, and we're going to do our little grass And now we got little bitty stems coming up. Bitty stems with some little bitty leaves. And they're all over the place. But our little bitty one is still not quite as big as the others. They're growing nice and tall, and it's still little. That's okay. All right, it says, what do they send down to the earth? So we're talking again about all of our plants. What are they doing? They send roots down to the earth. So let's draw a picture of our roots. Again, we draw our grass and do our little plants. And then we've got our little bitty one growing right here. And then we're going to draw these little kind of veiny looking things because those are the roots. And the roots are very important to our plants because without the roots, they can't get their nutrients and the water to help them continue to grow. So what do the stems do? And I'm sure you've learned about stems in science class. So the stems, we'll draw the stems down here in just a second. Those are these parts of the plant, part that the leaves and the roots come from. And we read the story. We learned that the stems grew up. The stems grew up. So they were slowly getting taller. They weren't quite as little as they were the last time. They're slowly growing. All right, what grows much faster? Now we know this whole time our tiny seed was growing, but it wasn't growing as fast as its neighbor. So the tiny seed grows slowly, but its neighbor grows quickly. And of course, I'll do my little picture again. And we can see our little bitty one growing right here. And then we've got one that's super big, growing super strong. Why does a small plant die? Now, of course, it was not our tiny seed, but another one sadly died. And it died because the tall weed, which weeds are no fun, used up all the water and sunlight. So because it used up all the water and sunlight, that other plant didn't get any. We'll draw a little sun and some rain coming down, because we know it can be sunny and rainy at the same time. And the poor other one just kind of wilted over because it didn't get any of the nutrients. And lastly, what finally starts to grow? Probably the best part of the whole story. The tiny seed, which is now a plant, starts to grow. So our little plant is not as little as it once was. It's finally getting as tall as the others. All right, now you'll finish the second half of the story and answer your questions. If you have any questions, please feel free to message Miss Ellis on ClassTag. Have a wonderful Wednesday.